Hey guys, welcome back for some more tutorials. Today we're going to be talking about defeating some Blink Stalker builds in Terran versus Protoss. For some reason that was really hard to get out. I had to sit there and make sure I said the right words. But yeah, defeating Blink is one of the harder things to do in this matchup, and I figured that it would be a good time to break it out and show you guys the way the pros are doing it so that you can kind of emulate their play and get an advantage if a Protoss decides to do that to you. So most importantly, you need to know the transitions from the Protoss so that you can kind of adapt to what they want to do. You need to protect well against the timings, which is going to be mostly the focus on our first game. And overrunning them at the right time. Blink Stalkers are one of those things where they're either really good, but if they're outmatched, they die in the blink of an eye. So, wow, that was a very terrible unintentional pun, so I apologize for that. But nevertheless, let's watch some games. So we're going to be watching Bomber versus Crank. And Bomber is pretty well known for getting cheesed harder than anybody in this matchup because everyone knows how good he is in the later stages of the game. And they also know that he tends to cut some corners and play a little bit greedy. So I think 2 of these replays are from Bomber and the other one is not. So we will see this all come up here though. And we're not going to focus too much on the openers because we've talked about these a lot. You just basically need to understand what's coming and understand how to react to it. Whether that's through scouting with a SCV maybe, scouting with a Reaper, you need to know when to scan, stuff like that, just to scout out the blink and know what's going on. So we're seeing some Marines rally forward here. He's just going to take an expansion, and this is one of the things that I mean about Bomber is cutting corners, that he's not going for a Reaper opener, so he doesn't really have that good of information. And Crank, I think he goes for this type of build because he realizes that Bomber's cutting corners, because the Reaper probably would have shown up by now, so he's just going to go for blink on one base. And you need to know about this if you're the Terran, because you absolutely need to react to this. You can't just do whatever and hope you win. Somebody that's good at blink is going to totally outposition you, and if you weren't aware that it's coming, then that's why you're in such big trouble. So back in Crank's base, obviously he's just on one base here. He's not going to really even be thinking about taking an expansion because he's going all in with this thing and hoping that it does a lot of damage. So if you're Terran, you either need to open Reapers and continue to scout and figure out what's going on, or you need to find points to scan here and spend a scan in the main and try to see if you can see any tech. The faster you know, the faster you can react, and that's obviously the biggest thing to knowing how to defeat really aggressive attacks like this, especially from Protoss, since they can do so many different things. So now that we've established that scouting is very important, let's talk about assuming that you know what's going on. How do you hold the blink? And the way that you usually want to do it is you want to understand that blink can be anywhere. It can attack here, it can attack behind here, it can attack in your main, it can attack here. So you need to be able to have some placements of maybe bunkers, or if you can get tanks or mines out to protect against that, so you can deal a lot of damage to the Stalkers and kind of punish them for blinking in places they're not supposed to. That's going to be the best way that you hold it off. So in this particular game, let's just focus on when Bomber knows and what he decides to do. Part of his build is a pretty fast factory, so he has one coming up now, and the factory can be pretty flexible. Again, mines and tanks are both really good options to dealing with this, and you just have to place them correctly, and you have to keep units alive and not get stuck in a bad spot where, say for example, Blink Stalkers are here and you're way down here and you can't recover to it fast enough. It's all about positioning, and it's all about especially knowing what's coming. So right now, Bomber doesn't really have any idea what's going on. He sees nothing in the main base. He doesn't really know what to do. He's going to produce mines anyway, which are a good play, just to be safe and kind of guess. If you heard the scan go down now, maybe he knows now what's going on, and yeah, he sees it. More importantly, you're going to see these lights on the Twilight Council kind of flash upward. That'll indicate that blink is being researched, so you want to make sure you're not being tricked and they're not going for Dark Shrine or something. So you can see those things flashing up there, and of course, if they're ever chrono boosting it, that's pretty obvious that there's blink on the way as well. So you can see there's a mine in the main here. You can see setting up another bunker to try and protect from other blink points. So right now he needs to defend at this point, and he needs to also defend his main base, so you can put up extra bunkers, just fill them up with Marines. There's also a tank on the way, and the tanks are going to be probably the best solution to these Blink Stalkers, considering they have so much range. They deal extra damage to armored, and they're pretty hard for Stalkers to get on top of if you have Marines supporting them as well. The other thing you should note is that the Protoss is still on one base here. You shouldn't kill yourself trying to defend this base if it's absolutely not necessary. If you just can't hold it, or if you feel more comfortable just holding on one base, Blink is one of the worst techs against a siege tank and marine type of play. So you can feel safe just having 2 orbitals and just move into your main if you know you're not going to hold it. So you need to be willing to make that type of judgment call and not kill yourself trying to protect too much territory that you shouldn't be trying to. Ultimately, if it's just one base versus one base, and you have better tech, then there's not much of a reason to be too worried about it. So, like we were talking about, there's multiple blink endpoints. If you can ever kill the mothership core, that's going to totally prevent them from having vision up here. So, killing the mothership core is a really big win, but I wouldn't go as far as making a Viking to try and get that. Just incidental. Like, if you can get it with your Marines or a mine or something, then perfect. So the Blink Stalkers blink up here. Note that he doesn't really have that good of defense from this, and this is why he should be a little willing to maybe give up this position if he needs to. So obviously just pulling stuff away here, moving your units all together and not getting too far surrounded. The tank is coming up now, so he can start sieging against this. And again, there's no way these Stalkers can afford to try and fight this tank because there's too much buffer. There's a mine, there's a bunch of Marines here, and you will need to be willing to fight with your SCVs every once in a while because Stalkers are really bad at killing SCVs as well. These things have pretty low damage output, and it only really gets bad if you start to throw away units against them. So that's the whole idea here. So the repair should be coming down on the command center, or he should lift it, and move it over somewhere to where the Stalkers would have to come closer in order to deal with that. So now Crank is going to start getting this tank here, but he's already lost quite a few Stalkers, and this Time Warp won't be nearly as bad in your own games nowadays because this isn't on an older patch. This Time Warp would have already worn off. You can see once these are pretty low, it's fairly easy to push these away, and there's another tank on the way anyway. So as long as you keep up on your production here and you understand what you need to push away these blink plays, Bomber is just giving up the natural here, so he's just going to go ahead and play on one base for a little while. Which is okay, once again, because if you were scouting and staying on top of that, you would know he's only on one base too, so it's not that big a deal. So Crank's just trying to open up extra attack avenues. There's a siege tank up here. And if you're back on one base like this, there's almost no territory to cover. Your tank can hit almost anything. So it's so much easier to defend on this on one base if it really comes down to it, and that's why I'm saying it's okay to sack your natural. Eventually you're going to want to get stim, and eventually you're going to want to start mixing in Marauders into this composition. That's one point that Bomber's kind of slacking on, is he's kind of forgetting his stim. Because if you can stim and run at the Blink Stalkers, with a good army, maybe with medevacs as well, then you're going to be in really good shape. That's one of those points where the Blink Stalkers just crumble like hilariously fast. And then if the pressure ever starts to relent and he's not getting more and more Stalkers, or he's not being aggressive anymore, that may be a point where he takes a Nexus. So that's when you should start looking to push down into your natural and retake that once again. So you can kind of push your tanks forward one at a time. Bomber's even salvaging the bunker he just built, which is hilarious. The other thing you do need to be aware of is that one of the transitions, especially off of one base blink, is DTs, considering they already have this up. So don't forget about saving scans and maybe putting up turrets and stuff, just so you don't die to something stupid like a follow-up like that. But you can continue to start to press down here to retake your natural. Bomber realizes there's no real pressure coming anymore, and he can see the Stalker counts with his mind, so he knows what's going on in terms of that. He still is being a little bit careful here and kind of pushing his tanks down little by little, but you can see once the tanks start hitting the Stalkers unravel really fast. Again, the counter blink potential is still possible, so you can blink in here, but this tank has so much range. He's already basically killed 2 Stalkers because he decided to blink in there, and he hasn't lost anything yet. Maybe a couple of workers, but I'd take that trade. A couple workers for a couple Stalkers is totally worth it. And now the blink play is officially pushed away. Crank can't reinforce as hard, and there's that Dark Shrine we were talking about. So make sure you're staying on top of your turrets and saving scans and stuff like that to deal with the DTs. So now that he's pushed this away, I don't think that there's a whole lot more we need to say about this game. This game was just particularly about pushing the initial one base play away. Now we're going to get into more replays that are more macro blink plays, like 2 base timings, which in that case you really shouldn't be giving up your natural because they're on 2 bases. And again, you need to know all this to know what your proper reactions are. And by the way, this is Bomber once again being attacked by a Blink Stalker player. This time it's Alicia, and it's on the exact same map. So some of these maps can really lend themselves to blink play, and I promise this is not the same replay, even though it looks exactly like it. So Alicia versus Bomber is our matchup here. And like I said, this time it's going to be a 2-base blink play, so the blink play is going to come a little bit later, and it's not going to be quite as aggressive as the 1-base plays, considering they should be trying to produce probes back at home, and they'll have spent money on a Nexus and all that good stuff too. So this is more so to see what they can get and try to punish a Terran that's being too greedy, or rather being a little bit too negligent of the things that could be going on around the map. And this is also a safer play from the Protoss. It doesn't rely on dealing much damage or any damage. So you should be aware that this is a possibility, and you should understand different ways to deal with this. So I don't know why we're watching the Protoss here. Let's take a look at the Terran and note that Bomber's doing pretty much the same build as before, just a couple Marines. He's being greedy once again and kind of skipping that Reaper play. But he is getting a faster factory this time, and this is just to start up mines, maybe to be ready to produce a tank if he absolutely needs it. More importantly, he needs the information that the Twilight Council is coming down. So he really needs to stay on top of that and understand that this is definitely a possibility. So right now, he really doesn't know much of anything, and this is where the blink play obviously is, or at least the building is. So scans may be a little bit hard to find, and this is why you probably should save them and at least err on the side of caution a little bit. So now there's mines coming out here, and the mines are a decent play against the blink, especially better against 2-base blink. I think this is so funny because this replay, I believe, was after the game against Crank. So you can see he's preparing to counter the way that the game we saw before. So he's putting a mine in that position over there to prevent blinks in from the back. But he's still playing really greedy, and without that Reaper, you really just don't know much. So he's just going to open up with a mine drop build, which is a pretty decent counter against this 2-base blink stuff, especially in lower levels, because if you drop a couple of mines, all these blink builds really don't have detection this early in the game. So Alicia is doing something a little bit more rare and actually adding on a faster robo. You don't see that very often with this type of play, but the mines are coming out now. You can see that some stuff is starting to rally across the map from Alicia, and Bomber needs to be understanding that this is definitely a possibility. He's even adding a second bunker here, but he's just playing so blind. Maybe he knows by now. Maybe he can figure that, considering he can see all this stuff coming up right now. But if he saw the Twilight Council, he'd know for sure. So he's pushing the mine out here. And again, almost all of these blink plays will have no forward detection, so that's why the mines are such a good idea. Right now, he's just basically enticing the Stalkers into chasing that mine, so that's kind of funny. But the extra bunkers coming up in here in the main. He's putting down the mines to punish Alicia for blinking in somewhere. You can even see that if he kept this mine here, he would have prevented this whole play from coming. But once again, here's extra tanks and some Marines and Marauders that are coming out as well. So again, this is just all about taking, or rather defending the attack here. So Alicia's doing the same thing we saw from the previous game, but since the tank is hitting these Stalkers, he's keeping his SCVs alive, even repairing them with the medevac. All this is going really well for him, and this shouldn't be too much of a threat. So getting Stim, getting the Marauders, like we talked about, all really important factors to holding these blink plays. But this is mostly held. I'd say he doesn't really need to worry too much about blink from the rest of this time. On 2 bases, it's really just the initial attack, and you need to hold the initial attack and not take too much damage. And then after that, the Protoss is typically more interested in going back home and transitioning. You should be aware of these transitions, and the transitions most commonly are into Charge, considering they already have the Twilight Council, and then eventually into Templar most of the time. Sometimes it's Colossus, but most of the time it is Templar. So keeping up on your mine production is going to be a really good idea against blink openers. And then you need to stay on top of your scouting as well to know that if they drop a Colossus Bay, that you can get some Vikings out there and get on top of him and punish him for that. But Charge, Blink, and Storm are really good complements to one another. It's a really common transition from Protoss. So you should be at least understanding that that's a possibility as far as a follow-up here. So let's look at the game timer here. It's about 17 minutes. We'll continue to watch as the blink does a little bit more. We're going to watch the transitions kind of flesh out more just a little bit though. So you can see another blink in here. You need to be ready with these mines. You can see the mines did get a decent hit on there. He does have his tanks moving over into position to deal with this. There's a Marauder in the mix as well. He's about to have, well, he's not about to have Stim, but he does have medevacs, and that's always really good against Blink considering they deal damage so slowly. So he's still pushing this away, taking a little bit of damage, but as long as you don't really take enough damage to die to it. By the way, Missile Turret, noting that the DT follow-up is a possibility, so Bomber being really good and diligent about that. preparing his bunker here. You need to be always willing to repair bunkers, so you should build them close to your mineral line so you can pull your SCVs really quickly. Nothing too crazy or wild or unusual here. And Immortals, along with the charge and the armor upgrades, is what's on the way for the Protoss here. There's the Templar Archives like we were expecting, so it's going to be for Storm, and that would mean that keeping up on your mines is a really good idea. Of course, if you can ever get there before Storm finishes, you might be able to do some damage with these tanks as well. So we're going to watch this game play out just a little bit longer. So Bomber's going to push forward right now. Alicia is now on the run, and this is what I mean about overrunning this. Eventually there'll be a point where you can just stim forward and there's nothing the Stalkers can really do to stop you, except for die or blink away. So there will be a point where you just need to decide to just get right in their face and push them out of there as fast as possible. Now that he's got these tanks, he might as well use them, because they're only going to get worse as the game goes on. So once you push this away, if you went for tanks, just start to push right back out there and get on top of them. Because if this Immortal count grows, or if the Charge Zealot amount grows, that can be bigger and bigger problems. Warp Prism coming in here, just defending this with his reinforcements back at home. Not really going to be a problem. And then from this point, the Blink has kind of ran its course, and we're in a different type of game. So maybe we should watch this just a little bit longer to see how the tanks play into this. Most of the time, the tanks sieging isn't going to be that big of a deal, so I wouldn't siege the tanks unless the Protoss is really staying back in his base. But the important thing you need to know is that considering they open Blink, you're going to have a really hard time walking away from fights like this. So any fight that you go into, you need to be really committed to staying in, because you can't escape. Otherwise, these Blink Stalkers will chase you down every time. So just stay there and fight as hard as you can and as long as you can. And you really need to gauge this and learn all the rules about engaging well in this type of scenario, which there's plenty of videos out there like that I've already made, so you can go back and watch those if you need to. But this is a little bit more of an unusual situation. You just need to know that you really can't afford to retreat from Blink attacks. But even still, if you're able to push those off, and if you get in there quickly enough, maybe before Storm finishes, you can get some okay trades. You can see Alicia did push that away, but at the same time, Bomber has a third command center coming up here, so he's still in great shape. And Alicia is going to be on the back foot for a little while, at least economically, because he's going to have a hard time recovering. So pushing back up in here is Alicia, and at this point, this is more about dealing with Storm and dealing with stuff like that. There's not too much more to say about the Blink, and I can assure you that Bomber does, eventually win this game. But it's his holding of the Blink is what put him in this good position here. I don't know that there's really a whole lot more to watch in this game. Bomber just basically crushes this attack because Alicia really doesn't have any upgrades or any base to follow back on. So yeah, he'll be totally fine here. Let's just watch one more about holding this Blink play. This is going to be a little bit of a different one, and this is a little more of a proactive way to hold the Blink plays. So this is going to be Illusion versus Minigun, of course 2 teammates. And this method is going to be more about aggression rather than just preventing them from dealing a lot of damage at your base. I'll show you what I mean here. This is kind of a cool game actually. So Illusion throwing out the GLHF. A little bit of banter going on here. Again, we're not going to pay too much attention to the openers here, but again, getting the Reaper earlier is going to give you a lot of information as far as the Blink play coming down. So I'd really recommend opening up with at least the 1 Reaper just to scout and figure out what's in their base. And that's what we should see here from Illusion. As you can see, the resources are just about lining up to solve that. So there's the Reaper. Of course, the expansion on the way afterward is going to be really common. But in this game, like we were talking about, he's going to solve the Blink play mostly with aggression. It's going to be mostly about getting up in the Protoss's face before the Blink really matters, and then meeting the Blink kind of in the middle of the map before the Stalker count gets too high to start having to sit back in your own base and defend it. So Probe coming in here, the Probe sees everything. 2 more barracks added on, and this is going to put him on a really good production level to start pressuring on the early game. We've already talked about using a lot of aggression against Protoss, and this is kind of the same philosophy, but this is to show that it can work against Blink if you do it the right way. So the Reaper's coming back into the main here, and he's going to scout out this Twilight Council if he gets far enough. He may not get all the way around, and that's why you need to be willing to spend scans. So let's see when he knows, and or rather what he knows and when he knows it. He just goes ahead and runs away. Of course, there is a second jump up point that he can just head up here. Or if he just sees a lot of Stalkers, he could just figure that it's Blink anyway, and I think that's what happens. So Illusion's just going to pressure here, and you can see, look how fast he's moving out right now. And this is at a point where the Blink is on the way, But if the blink is this fast, then he can't have enough gateways up quickly enough to get everything out that he needs to get out to defend against this really well. So this will probably kill a few units. It'll probably kill like a few probes and maybe a couple stalkers. But if they have like 5 or 6 stalkers to defend something like this, then it makes it obvious that blink is the play. So there is stim on the way, obviously a lot faster than what we saw before. But the pressure is going to kind of put the momentum in Illusion's favor. He's coming up here, he's going to kill a zealot, walks up the ramp here, he can get a stalker. Time warp is pretty strong here, so he won't really have that much of a micro potential. But the fact that he's seeing all these stalkers being warped in right now, and if he gets far enough into the base, he'll be able to see the blink that's coming down. This may not have looked like it did very much, but it did kill a stalker, and it did show him that he's defending basically only with stalkers. So he might have a good idea that this is going on, but he's just going to use continual aggression just to be sure that he can catch this kind of stuff in the middle of the map while it's still moving out. So he figures, so this is one of many things he can do. If it is blink, then these units are already out here, and maybe he can meet these stalkers at the top of the ramp with stronger units than he has. So that's one option. If it's not blink, he can always just move these units back a little bit later and realize that the blink timing is probably passed. Most of the time with these blink plays, especially on 2 bases, it's going to finish up at about 8:30. That's when they're going to have a decent amount of stalkers, but considering he went in there and he traded it a little bit, he killed a stalker and a zealot for it, he's going to meet the stalkers out here in the middle of the map. He's just going to push this off before it ever even gets established. And also note that the fact that he's so Marauder heavy, this is a new style that's really coming into favor now that the mines are a lot better against Protoss. He can stay really Marauder heavy like this, and this will really shut down blink plays, especially if you have stim and shells, which you'll want to research eventually. But this Marauder heavy play along with mines is super strong against these gateway styles, and this is one of the ways that he really pushes this off quite effectively. So he's just walking out to a point that the stalkers will probably want to cross to start setting up the blink plays, and once he gets there, Minigun has to really slow down a lot. He has to wait for warp-ins. Illusion knows this is coming. He can continue to press out here. Now that he knows this is going on, look how well he can trade against these stalkers since he's so Marauder heavy. And the stim is now done, so he can chase these things down. He's really just shutting this down before it's even a thing. And this is one of the cooler ways I've seen to hold the blink plays like this and to play a super aggressive and mine-based style. I can assure you that this eventually would turn into Marauder Mine as most of his composition once the game went on a little further. But he has not added his factory. He's just keeping on this aggression because he thinks it's blink. But this Marauder Mine style is really cool. It's something that's really coming into favor right now. And I think Terran players are going to go a long way with it as long as mines stay as strong as they are. So, I mean, the blink play is held. This is basically done as far as holding the blink play, considering he's already pushed it away, and the blink has done basically nothing for Minigun right now. So, I just thought this was a really cool way to hold this and a really cool way to be aggressive about it. Eventually, Illusion does just push over Minigun and gets a huge economic advantage with his aggression. But once again, that's beyond the scope of this video. It's beyond the blinks phase. There's more about using constant aggression and stuff in the playlist, which is down in the description of the video, so check that out. But I hope this at least gave you guys some good ideas for holding this off, and I'll always be back for more videos, so check those out in the near future. I'll see you guys later, and take care.